Thank you very much, and thank you for the welcome. It's good to be back in Helsinki after COVID, after wars, and many other things. I'm finally back here, and it is very good to see everybody. Thank you very much for welcoming me. And that's about as pleasant as I can be for now. I'm going to have to warn everyone. Firstly, I do not speak a word of Finnish, so everything will be in English. Thank you to everyone who helped me translate this. The other thing I need to say is, over the next 45 minutes, you will be very angry at most of the information I'm going to show you. So please be aware of that. However, I will provide a little bit glimmer of hope in the fact that you, all of you here, your friends, your families, and those who will be watching it online, actually can do something about the information that will make you angry. And to start with that, I need to tell you that the answer to this very first question is you. The story that I'm going to tell starts many years ago in Durban in South Africa in 2001. As you may notice, my accent is South African. I was born there. And I was born at the very end of the horrible, almost evil system of apartheid, which was a system of national segregation between white people and black people. Whites were seen as superior, despite the fact that they were the overwhelming minority. And for many years, they instituted the system of apartheid. Following the end of apartheid, appropriately, the United Nations held a conference in Durban, South Africa. The aim of the conference was to fight racism, xenophobia, hatred, modern-day slavery, all of the ills that are unfortunately part of the modern world. And bear in mind, this was in 2001. We were a very different world today. But this conference, rather than be a conference that dealt with the real issues of hatred in the world, as you can see, became an anti-Israel hate festival. In fact, the festival itself crossed those very blurry lines between hatred of Israel and hatred of the Jewish people. This is just one example. Imagine being a Jewish student at a conference that's supposed to deal with racism, and there is a picture of Adolf Hitler, and the poster says, well, what if I had won the war? There'd be no Palestinian suffering. The conference was also attended by thousands of delegates from non-governmental organizations, NGOs. NGOs with wonderful and appropriate sounding names like Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, the Center for Human Rights, and many, many others. And what did these organizations, these pillars of the human rights community, what did they do when they saw this anti-Semitism? They joined it. They joined it in such a way that at the end of the conference, this was the declaration put out. Notice the words here. Mandatory comprehensive sanctions and embargoes, severing of diplomatic links, declare Israel a racist apartheid state, call on the international community to impose a policy of complete and total isolation of Israel. Nearly 25 years ago, the human rights community, the NGOs, had already told us what they were going to do. Israel is an apartheid state, like the evils of South Africa. Israel should be boycotted. Israel should be divested. Israel should be sanctioned. 25 years ago, they were saying this. Nobody listened. Nobody knew this was coming. My mentor and teacher, Professor Gerald Steinberg, was one of the few who saw this. And so he started NGO Monitor, an academic organization that actually monitors the activities, but more importantly, the funding of the human rights community And how did it go from a noble cause to the leaders of the anti-Israel movement of today? We maintain our independence as a non-governmental organization. We are privately funded. We refuse to receive any government funding, whether it's the Israeli government or outside. And most importantly, we want our information to be shared with as many people and as many audiences as possible. First and foremost, what do? As the saying goes, we follow the money. Now, the figures I'm going to show you are only the amounts that we know of that come directly or indirectly from governments. Between 175, nearly 200 million euro a year goes to these same human rights groups that are active internationally, that are active in Israel, and are active in the Palestinian Authority. Now, the 5 million that you see here from Finland is just for human rights. It does not include UNRWA, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. So this number is in addition to the UNRWA funding, and I'm not even going to speak about UNRWA. Now I want to take a slightly separate track. Regardless of how people in this audience may feel about things like the two-state solution, the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, we need to put our own personal opinions on that very, very important issue aside, because I'm going to look at what is the current Finnish government and its predecessor, what have they said about the future? So the foreign ministry, the foreign ministers, and the heads of government have all made it very clear. Finland's strategic vision is to support a peaceful solution, to promote peace and negotiation, a two-state solution. Okay, that is what the government wants. Finland supports a two-state solution, two independent states, negotiations, peace. Okay. So the Finnish policy is to support peace and a negotiated two-state solution, meaning there will be a state of Israel and a state of Palestine. Now let's look at what they actually do with your money. So the largest open program that we see is what is called the Defense and Respect for International Law and Human Rights. It is a 3 million euro project that runs from 2021 to 2025 in support of an organization called the Independent Commission for Human Rights. This is a Ramallah-based organization that receives 3 million euro, around about 800,000 a year, 800,000 euro a year, for the promotion of human rights. Now keep in mind, the Finnish policy we said before was a negotiated two-state solution and peaceful resolution. This organization is one of the largest recipients of Finnish funding, not aid, but to promote human rights. Let's see some of their promotion. Look at the date of this. This is the 8th of October, 2023. Israelis, myself included, had been drafted. In some cases, there were still kibbutzim that were on fire. Bodies were strewn all over the southern Israel. The Palestinian Independent Commission for Human Rights strongly condemns the grave violations of human rights perpetuated by the Israeli occupation against Palestinian civilians in Gaza. Did something happen before that? That suddenly Israel is attacking Gaza? Well, not according to the Palestinian. This is on the 8th of October. This is what they're putting out. The next day, the organization sent a letter to all of the United Nations commissioners and human rights volunteers and rapporteurs. And I've highlighted here. Since October 7th, 2023, when Palestinian factions in Gaza launched the Al-Aqsa Storm operation targeting settlements near Gaza. Is that the language of an organization worthy of receiving 3 million euro in human rights funding. The Al-Aqsa storm targeting Israeli settlements. 1,000 Israelis were murdered in the most brutal way. They were burnt to death. People were beheaded. And a human rights organization says it was an operation by armed people against Israeli settlements. This same organization, the Independent Commission for Human Rights, wonderful sounding name, also submitted information to the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice, where they made it very clear. On October 7th, Israel launched airstrikes in response to Palestinian armed groups operating within Israel's internationally recognized borders. Palestinian armed groups. So, it's very clear where they stand with regards to Israel, but they're using their money that they got from Finland and other countries to charge Israel at the International Criminal Court because of what Israel did on October 7th and 8th. No mention about civilians killed or why Israel was forced to respond. That is just one organization, one avenue of funding. There is many more. The next is another human rights program. This time it actually does go to the United Nations. And interestingly, it goes through a United Nations organization called the United Nations Development Program, UNDP. Now, generally, when we speak about development, we'd imagine we're building schools, we're building educational facilities, we're building sanitation. But in this case, no. Development, in this case, is about human rights. We're developing human rights. So, 3 million euro from Finland goes to the United Nations Development Program. And the United Nations Development Program gives that money under Sweden's guidance to Israeli and Palestinian NGOs, human rights groups in Israel and the Palestinian Authority for developing human rights. Who are these organizations that are receiving millions from the Finnish government to develop human rights? Well, one of them is an organization called Al-Haq, led by this man over here, Shawan Jabarin. Here is a picture of Shawan Jabarin at a PFLP rally. Those red flags are from a designated European terrorist organization called the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. Among the things the PFLP is famous for is the Entebbe hostage taking and numbers of other murders of Israelis and American and European citizens. It is one of the few terrorist organizations that even the European Union recognizes. And here is Shawan Jabarin hanging out just happens to be hanging out at a PFLP event. But other than being associated with a designated terrorist organization, what does Al-Haq actually represent? Well, the organization has made it very clear. Their goal is an end to the Zionist project. Remember, Sweden funds them because Sweden believes in a negotiated two-state solution. But Al-Haq makes it very clear their ultimate goal is an end to Zionism. Zionism is racism. The PA, the Palestinian Authority, should not negotiate in any way with Israel. But we spoke about a negotiated two-state solution. They're at the forefront, and I'm going to speak about this in a minute, of the cases against Israel and Israeli military and civilian leaders at the International Criminal Court and in the International Court of Justice. And we've already mentioned their ties to the PFLP. This document on Al-Haq's website was a letter that they sent to the European Union in July 2023, a few months before Hamas's brutal, murderous attack on Israel. Here's a couple of highlights. We stress that the reference to the mutually agreed land swaps is irreconcilable with self-determination. So the basis of Finnish policy of a negotiated two-state solution and negotiation This human rights group says, no, that you can't mention that at all. Hamas needs to be removed from the list, ensuring that Palestinians can be democratic. Hamas is a terrorist group by all means. But in July, before the terrorist attack, this organization, Al-Haq, was lobbying Europe with European money to remove Hamas from the terrorist list. But what did they want? Europe to start criminal investigation of Israeli leaders. This is even before October 7th war. Al-Haq had already laid the groundwork. International pressure, International Criminal Court, removing Hamas from the terrorist list. This all came about before October 7th. How did Al-Haq respond to October 7th? Again, important that I need to explain how we do our work. None of this is super spy work. Everything that I'm showing you is either from the website of the organization, their Facebook page, their X account, or in some cases, the Facebook pages of the organization itself. There's nothing hidden here. Nobody in the foreign ministry in Finland or in the European Union in Brussels can say we didn't know. It is all out in the open. None of this is hidden at all. On October 7th, 2023, Palestinian armed groups engaged in an operation in response to escalating Israeli crimes against the Palestinian people. So, not only did they lay the groundwork for the diplomatic war, the first thing they put out is an excuse for Hamas. It was an armed attack because of what Israel had done. And we spoke about laying the groundwork. On October 9th, 2023, 2 days into the war, Israeli soldiers hadn't yet officially entered Gaza. In many cases, we were still picking up body pieces of the kibbutzim and communities around the Gaza Strip. And Al-Haq, what did they say? Urgent, Israel announces total warfare. Gaza's population employing starvation as a weapon. 2 days in, and they're now laying the groundwork for the next case of starvation. And that is the basis of much of the International Criminal Court case against Israel is starvation. But it started after 2 days. That is a diplomatic coup that nobody seemed to pay attention to. And here's something that people in Finland don't know. Finland is facing I need to be diplomatic, a challenging neighbor. And as a result, you have joined NATO. And Finland and its armed forces will stand proudly as members of NATO, and you will contribute well to the NATO alliance. However, here is Shawan Jabarin handing out a request for prosecution to Fatou Bensouda, the former prosecutor of the ICC. This is even before October 7th. They were already preparing cases against Israel. This is the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, in The Hague. Here's Shawan Jabarin again, in the third row behind the South African delegation. Al-Haq is at the forefront of what is called legal warfare, lawfare against Israel. And they're doing this with Finnish funding. But it's not just at the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice. Netherlands, UK, Denmark, US, and France, NATO members, are also facing Al-Haq. Why? Because Al-Haq is suing the Dutch government because the Dutch government is part of the F-35 fighter jet program. The F-35 fighter jet is a jet used by most NATO countries. But Al-Haq says the F-35 shouldn't be part of this, because if Holland is sending it to Israel, then the F-35 program is an anti-human rights program. It should be shut down. So Al-Haq is threatening the NATO membership of the Netherlands. But they did the same thing in Denmark using Oxfam. And the same thing in the UK. Twice, actually. And in France, they're threatening French military suppliers that work with Israel. So Al-Haq is not only threatening Israel and Israeli security, they're doing the same thing to the NATO alliance. This is not the first time. The hatred and irrational hatred against Israel may start with Israel, but it very, very quickly makes it to the rest of the Western world. And now I do need to speak a little bit about internal Israeli organizations. I'm proud to live in the democratic and Jewish country of Israel, where we have a variety of opinions. Those who agree with the government, those who disagree with the government, those who somewhat disagree, and etc. And within my country, we have organizations that are vehemently opposed to Israeli actions, and in some cases, to the fact that Israel is a Jewish state. Now, I very much disagree with the outlook of these organizations. Among two of them is an organization called B'Tselem, and another one is Breaking the Silence. Now, democratically, they can do whatever they want, including calling Israel an apartheid state, including providing information that is sent to the International Criminal Court and International Court of Justice. They're fully allowed to do that. But why is the Finnish government and Europe, why is the European Union funding these organizations within Israel to send Israel to the International Criminal Court? What does it say about Europe's respect for democracy when they're funding internal Israeli organizations that are on the far fringe of society, and they do it knowing that they will create controversy in Israel? What does that say about Finland's respect for democracy? And I do need to speak a little bit about the work of the Church of Finland, FinChurch and FinChurch Aid. For many, many years, the churches have been involved, particularly in an organization called the Ecumenical Accompaniment Program in Israel and Palestine, EAPPI. The EAPPI is a program of the World Council of Churches that sends volunteers to Israel for 3 months to experience Israel. But the experiences are in Hebron, where they meet with Palestinians. In Israel, they meet with the organizations I've shown you before. And some of the work they do is monitoring Israelis. Now, as a Jew, we have at best, a complicated relationship with Christianity. Fortunately, in the modern world, we have progressed to a place where we can actually not only live in harmony, but we can thrive together. But when the church is funding people who follow the IDF soldiers around with cameras, just waiting for something to go wrong, it echoes back to a very, very troubling past. And it is time for the Finnish church to reconsider their support for the EAPPI program. Because the program has a host of graduates that have supported BDS, that are openly calling for the destruction of Israel, that make associations to Israel and crucifixion. And this is even before the war. But there's more. I warned you, you'd be angry. Just want to point that out. Okay, there's more. Business and human rights. Now, many people will say, what does that have to do with Israel? And more importantly, what is business? And everyone wants to be good in business. not only make money, but it's also important to be an ethical business person. Whether you own a major company or a small store, it's important to be ethical. Finland actually provides significant money to international organizations that monitor ethical businesses. One of them is the Center for Research on Multinational Corporations. It's a Dutch organization. And they provide information about how international organizations, work ethically. So again, they're only 31,000 euro. It doesn't seem like a lot, but for an organization, that is a lot. May 2024, urge a fuel embargo on Israel, accuse states and corporations of complicity. So, according to SOMO, using Finnish funding, if a Finnish organization works with an Israeli company, or a Finnish company works with an Israeli company, that's not ethical. They've called for an arms embargo and trade suspension. And in 2024, they signed a letter calling for the EU to cancel its association agreement with Israel. And there's another one. The International Federation for Human Rights. They've received over €1 million from the Finnish government. November 23, accused Israel of unfolding crime of genocide. In October 2023, when the war broke out, they blamed Israel's apartheid regime for Hamas attacks. Not Hamas, Israel is responsible. Hamas had no choice. They had to do what they had to do. And surprisingly, FIDH, their former chairman is Shawan Jabarin from Al-Haq. Isn't that an interesting coincidence? Now, how does all this come together? In addition to making us angry, we're often asked, well, if everybody is against Israel, if the United Nations, the church, all these businesses, if everyone is against Israel, clearly there's something to it. Well, I'm going to upend that and give you an answer that may shock everyone. And the answer is, it's not different. It's not different organizations, not different people. It is all the same. So whether it's the European Union or Finland or the United Nations, we're going to deal with human rights, the church, and business and human rights. So let's put it all together now. So bear with me, this may be a little complicated, but I'll try and make it as simple as possible. So Finland gives money to the Human Rights Program and to the United Nations. The European Union gives money to human rights and the United Nations, and Finland gives money to the church. Okay, we're all familiar with what we'll call step one. You as taxpayers are giving lots of money to human rights groups. You're all with me so far? Okay. Finland will also give money to the United Nations to do the same thing. So we can have a Finnish taxpayer like yourself could be giving the same organization money 3 times. We've already seen that the recipients downstream of all of this money are these same NGOs, the Israeli NGOs, Al-Haq, the Independent Commission for Human Rights. They're getting all this money. And at the same time, we have the business organizations that are receiving money. Now, who does the media, the Finnish government, and indeed academia, the universities, who do they turn to as the experts on any topic? The same NGOs. So the same NGOs that are getting Finnish money are referred to as the experts. And they go back and tell the Finnish government or the media that the situation is very bad. And the Finnish government says, well, the situation is very bad, we should give more money to human rights groups. And the human rights groups get more money, and they say the situation is very bad, we should get more money. And so we create a perfect circle of funding, not only anti-Israel funding, but lobbying for more funding. So in essence, you are not only paying anti-Israel organizations, you are paying anti-Israel organizations to lobby your government to give them more money. I simplify this when I speak to certain groups, and I speak about a bridge. What do I mean by a bridge? Are there any engineers in the audience? I know there's a doctor at least. Okay. When a city wants to build a bridge, they hire a consulting firm to tell them the bridge needs to go from point A to point B over the river. It needs to use certain material. It should be this long. It should cost roundabout a certain amount of money. Okay? That is the consulting firm. The city then offers it to engineering firms to build a bridge. And they say you have to build it this long, this wide. It needs to be built within a certain amount of time. And it needs to cost a certain amount of money. And that way, the best offer will win. What happens if the bridge isn't built? Well, we can see the bridge is not built. You wasted our money. There should be penalties. There could be jail time. There could be fines. But that is when we're dealing with something tangible, something concrete, building a bridge. The same thing happens if we're funding education, whether it's in the Palestinian areas, whether it's in Israel, whether it's in the Congo or Guatemala. You're funding education, you build a school, you train teachers, you print textbooks. If those things don't happen, the organization receiving your funding has failed. But what about the field of human rights? How do we judge success in the field of human rights? And if you can't judge success, how do you judge failure? Well, you can't do either. Therefore, it just constantly gets and demands more money. So it's what we call the halo effect. Appropriately, we're in a religious setting, a halo. Again, I don't mean to blaspheme, so please understand this is for imagery only. An NGO, a human rights organization, has a halo because everybody wants to be in favor of human rights. Nobody will say, no, I don't care about human rights. Whether you call yourselves Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, or the Independent Commission for Human Rights, you have that halo of human rights. And you can use that halo of human rights because remember, you can do no wrong. You can never judge people badly for human rights. They use that halo to speak to the media, to speak to diplomats, to speak to academia, because nobody will ever criticize them. Because you can't criticize human rights. There's no way to say they failed. But there are solutions. And here we get to what you can do. We have a 12-step plan for governments, but I'm actually only going to focus on the first few. And it goes like this. Make sure that your funding is in line with your policies. If the Finnish government believes in a negotiated two-state solution, only organizations that do that are worthy of your funding. It doesn't matter if you call yourselves Save the Children, Human Rights Watch, Justice, or anything. If you do not sign that you support a negotiated two-state solution, you are unworthy of receiving Finnish government funding. It's as simple as that. The next step, and this is unfortunately where Finland is failing, is pure transparency. That means that anyone in this room should be able to go to a website of the Finnish Foreign Ministry and simply ask, where is my money going? And the answer can't be, it goes to the UN. It goes to a human rights project. The answer must be, it goes to this organization and we're checking and we know exactly every cent that goes to them so that you can tell the government whether you approve of it or not. As of now, In order to find the information I did, I had to go through the Finnish Foreign Ministry website, the International Aid Transparency Index, the development portal of the European Union, and the websites of some of these organizations themselves. That is not the way transparency works, especially in a country like Finland that values transparency so highly. We then need to speak about vetting, exactly what we spoke about before. The organizations receiving Finnish funding need to be worthy. They need to be checked and double-checked. And clearly, the system is failing, because if I could find this information online and they're still getting money, they're not being properly vetted. They're not being properly checked. Obviously, there needs to be correct checking with regards to terror affiliation. And that doesn't mean the organization, that means the people in the organization. An individual with a terrorist past can't suddenly decide to, after he's come out of jail, after he's committed heinous acts, that he is now a human rights worker. That is not the way things should work. And it is the duty of the funder, in this case, whether it's the foreign ministry, to ensure that the people working in this organization have no terror affiliations. Accountability and evaluation. As of now, the only way organizations are actually evaluated, the only way the government in Finland can check where the money has gone, is because the organization that receives the money is telling them. There is almost no independent verification process in Finland. By the way, there is almost no independent variation process within the European Union either. In fact, just last month, the European Union Court of Auditors came out with a 60-page document saying that the European Union's funding mechanism to NGOs is a complete mess. There is no oversight, there's no accountability, there's no transparency, there's not even a clear definition of who should receive funding as a human rights organization. And this is not me saying that, this is the European Court of Auditors. So while I could come here and be very critical of the Finnish government, it is actually a much larger problem that exists within the entire system of the European Union. The solution that you can offer is knowledge. This is a very small taste of the work we do, and I focused it very, very specifically on certain Finnish organizations and certain Finnish-funded organizations. But you can find much more on our website. The Finnish information will be updated within the week. I've just taken it down this morning so that I can update it based on new findings. It'll be up shortly. But I encourage you to look at our website, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, etc. I should change Twitter to X. All of this information, not only about funding, but about the organizations. Okay, I think we're going to take a break and we'll be back for questions. Thank you very much.